YouTube, this is Evie. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all that is again part of my ongoing December series that is all about getting involved in the real life BDSM community. Now I want to go over another subject that I mentioned in a couple of my previous videos before, and that is my first experience at a dungeon. I have sort of two different stories I want to tell here. One was my first ever visit to any dungeon, and then the second time is the first time I'd gone to a new dungeon after I'd moved, and it was actually the same night that I met my future dom. So I want to talk about briefly my first ever experience going to a dungeon. This was in, I want to say March or April, about 2 years ago. And this is when I was in college, so I think I was probably a junior in college at the time, and I had two people that I knew that I had talked to on FetLife before they were going, and they invited me to come with them to this particular party. Now, at this point in time, I had been involved in BDSM and kink, and I had a couple of partners that I played with, like casually at their houses or at my apartment, but I had never actually been to a BDSM party before, so I wasn't really sure what to experience. Now, luckily, the particular dungeon I was going to does have a actual page on FetLife that you can go and visit, and they also have a discussion board, so I was able to see some pictures of what the inside looked like at first, and I could get a sense of what the attendance of the particular event was going to be like. But when I actually went there, it was still different than what I was expecting, because I'd never been to a dungeon before. I didn't really know what I was actually going to see. Now again, this was a pet play themed party, so it had a very specific feel to it. There wasn't a lot of other play going on, and by that I mean there wasn't anybody in rope, there wasn't any impact play. It was just meant for pets and for littles, and the front room of the dungeon was where all the pet play stuff was happening, and then the back room of the dungeon is where all of the little activities were happening. Now for the actual pet play portion of it, mostly what I ended up doing that night was they actually had like a pen set up where they had put down a bunch of blankets and toys and things, and you could, it was like a petting zoo type of thing, and you could write and leave a sign saying your name and then where it was okay to pet you and how it was okay to interact with you. And that's what I ended up doing. I wrote down my name, and I wrote down I was a little puppy, and I liked playing with XYZ, and I liked being, petted on my head, but that if you touched my tail, I was probably going to bite you, blah, blah, blah. And I put that in front of where I was at, and I mostly spent the entire time playing with other animals. There were so many different animals there, because I think a lot of times online you mostly see kitties, puppies, and ponies. But when I was there, there were puppies, there were kitties, there was a wolf, there was a fox, there was a raccoon, there was a raven, there was a dragon. There were all sorts of different kinds of pets at this particular party that were all playing with each other and having a good time. And I was playing tug of war with the wolf puppy that was there, and I was playing fetch, and I kept trying to steal the cat's toy that the cat was playing with, and it was just so much fun. I had such a great experience. There was one thing that happened at this particular party that kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, and I didn't actually end up going back to this dungeon for a while because of it. While I was there, there was somebody, and I don't even know if he still goes to this dungeon because I haven't been back in a while, so I don't know if he still goes there. But after I was done in the petting area because I was tired, he approached me, and he was asking me about how involved I was in BDSM and if I was new, blah blah blah. And I was happy to talk with him about that, and I was like, yeah, I'm kind of new, this is my first time in a dungeon, but I've been interested in BDSM for a really long time, and I've been playing for the last couple months or whatever. And he kept asking me about what I was interested in, and it kind of got personal, and it got weird really fast, and I was basically saying, that I wasn't really comfortable with XYZ kind of play, and then he was explaining to me that well, a dom is there to help mold you and teach you how to enjoy these things. And I'm like, okay, buddy, okay. And he kept talking, and it was he was trying to convince me to become his submissive just right then, and it was very weird. Now luckily, even though I wasn't very experienced, I knew enough that this was an odd interaction and shouldn't be happening, so I ended up making some excuses, and I went to the other room, and I actually ended up sitting down with one of the littles that I had met who was petting me while I was in the petting zoo, and I ended up coloring with him, and we had a good time, and we played around and wrestled for a bit, and it was good and it was fun. I had a good time after that, but I did have that kind of one weird experience with somebody approaching me and being like very forward about having a relationship with me, and it was very odd. But all that being said, I had a very good first experience at that particular dungeon, and I ended up going again a couple of times. I was a college student, so I couldn't really afford to go as often as I wanted to, and then I actually ended up moving. And where I moved to, I actually had access to another dungeon. I've been very, very lucky. The part of the country that I live in has access to a lot of dungeons, and it's just so great that I can live in a place that has a very positive BDSM community. But this was very recently. This was in, I think, the beginning of August of this past year is when I went. And I was talking with somebody that I had met, and they introduced me to this party, and they were like, oh, there's going to be this party that's really fun. It's one of my favorite parties to go to at this particular venue, and you should totally go, but I'm not going to be there. I'm actually going to be out of town. And I was like, well, like, do I want to go if I'm like not going to know anybody there? And I was kind of on the fence about it for a while, and I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go. But you know what? I found out that this dungeon was actually going to be closing soon because they had lost their lease and needed to find a new place to go to. So I was like, you know what? God damn it. I don't even care that it's a weekday. I don't even care how tired I'm going to be. I'm going to go. So I went. I went by myself. It was about an hour drive to get there. I pretty much got home from work, changed really quickly. I did my makeup and left. And this was a TNG party. That is the next generation party. So it is specifically for people who are 18 to 35, and there is a social hour at the beginning, probably the first half, and then after that is the actual play party. And before the play party actually starts, you're not allowed to use any of the equipment. So I thought this was a perfect way to meet the new community, because there is a specific time that I set up where the only thing that was going to be happening was just socializing and talking and meeting people. So that was great, because at the time I had no idea if there were any munches or where the munches were or what kinds of people went to the munches that were there. So play party was really the way to go for me. Now, when I went there, I pretty much immediately started up a conversation with somebody as soon as I got in the door, and they were very nice, and for the life of me, cannot remember their name, but I've met them before a couple other times, like rope groups and stuff, and they knew that I was new, and they were like, oh, where are you from? Like, oh, I just moved from this place. They were like, oh, I've been there before. Like, how do you like the dungeon there? And I was talking with them about that and some of the parties they had been to there in the past. We had a good conversation. Then I got all checked in. I prepaid for the party. I had them check my ID and check my membership card from the old dungeon that I went to, because usually to go to dungeons you have to buy a membership to be able to go in. It's just their way of kind of making money to actually run the dungeon, and also just to monitor who is actually going to parties and things like that. So I checked in and I paid, and it was so busy. It was like overwhelmingly busy. So I know maybe it doesn't seem like it from the way that I talk in my videos and just, you know, what my persona is like on a camera, but I'm actually very, very introverted, and I find it hard to talk to new people. I really do. I find it difficult to talk to new people because I don't like being invasive in other people's conversations. I tend to be kind of very quiet and reserved, and I tend to kind of watch things happening rather than being like proactive and getting involved myself. So I tend to be kind of reserved and like held back, but it was so jam-packed that was just not an option for me. It was wall-to-wall people, and I scoped out the room, and I was like trying to think. I'm like, there were a lot of people who were just like paired off there that you could tell were going to be playing together later, and I was like trying to find a group of people that like seemed pretty open, that were like around my age, that you know, had actually a seat next to them. That was the key point, was a place to sit. And I found a place, and it was a chair that was shaped like a high heel, and I don't know why I thought that was very funny, and it still is very funny, but that's where I sat. And it was a group of maybe like 5 people who were really friendly, and they basically included me right away. It was really nice, and for the most part during the conversation I was kind of hanging back and just sort of listening to them and like getting a sense for what this particular community was like, and they were super funny and super nice, and I really liked hanging out with them. As it got to be closer to the time when the play party was going to be starting to happen, that is when I started to talk with Mr. Tex, and for some reason we got into a conversation about electroplay. And we had also previously been talking about my shirt, because I was wearing a shirt, and I think you guys have maybe seen it in a video. I think I wore it in my like Rabid Kitten Creations review video or something. And it's a shirt, and it says like Tokyo, Milan, and maybe New York or somewhere. And it has a bunch of different countries on it. And he was telling me about like trips that he had taken to those particular countries. He was like planning on going to Milan and like all that stuff. So we had a good conversation, and then we started talking about electroplay because he had a bunch of his equipment there. And I was like, well, I never really tried it before. And he was telling me about like how it worked and like what violet wands were like. I had one experience, I think once during one of like about a year and a half ago with like a Tay-Zapper or a violet wand or something, like one time, and that was it. And I never really tried it again as part of a full scene. And we were talking about that, and he had actually had a scene set up that he was going to be doing right when the play party started, but that I was welcome to watch and that I could go with him and I could look through the bag of things that he had brought with him and I could see if I was interested in doing a scene with him. So I did. I watched him do a scene. I was sitting there all pretty. I was like holding the water glass like this and just watching him beat this other submissive, and it was very nice because I got to watch a lot of other scenes that were happening while this was going on, so it was super nice. I got to be very much in the experience. Now, every single time I would leave from his side and go somewhere else, either to go and like get more water or just to like walk around, because I was wearing high heels, so it was a little bit uncomfortable to just like stay in the same place all the time. Every single time I would like move around to like watch another scene or something, somebody would start a conversation with me, like right away. Like I could not get like 20 feet away without somebody starting a conversation with me, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Because I did actually get to talk to a really lot of nice people, but a lot of them were mostly vanilla guys, which, being a little bit judgmental here, but a lot of them were mostly vanilla guys who had never experienced BDSM before, and you could just tell their eyes were like, what is happening? What is happening? What are all these people doing? And they would start a conversation with me, and I could tell it was because they wanted to play with me, because they thought I knew what I was doing, and I'm, you know, I like that I give up the vibe that I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm here to do, but I don't necessarily want to start every single conversation with somebody being like, so what kinks are you into? Why are you here? Blah, blah, blah. Like, sometimes I just want to have a conversation about anime or some shit before we start talking about the kinky stuff, you know? Anyways, I kept getting stopped for other people who wanted to talk with me. I'm like very glad that they're very like welcoming and talkative, but sometimes I'm just like, you are literally the third person who's asked me today, like, what my kinks are and, like, why I'm here. Like, please, I just want to get this water and go back to what I'm doing. But I had a lot of conversations with people that were mostly pretty short, and I went back and I finished watching the scene. And then after that, I negotiated with him for an impact scene, and I told him, you know, my pain tolerance isn't that great. Like, I used, like, something happened, like, a couple months ago. My pain tolerance just went, like, boop. So, not same level of pain tolerance that I used to have. I had my hands tied up like this, and he was using a violet wand with a knife and dabbing me with a Tay-Zapper, and we also used a quirt and a flogger and a bunch of other stuff, and it was a lot of fun, and I had a really good time, and it was like the first successful impact play scene that I had had in a very long time, like probably in a couple months, because previously when I was doing impact play scenes, I would just be like, nope, this ain't happening, I'm not digging this. But it was actually a really positive experience, and it was really good, and after we were done, we had some cuddles, we had a little bit of aftercare, and after that time, it was pretty much about 10 minutes before we had to leave, so I very quickly changed. While I was there, I met somebody that I actually knew, and I was like, I know you, and he was like, I know you, why are you here? And turns out that we just happened to cross paths, and he knew Mr. Tex. They all knew each other, and it was a very like odd moment where I was like, wait, so you people all know each other? And it was good, but I'm glad that I ended up hanging out with the right people and the right group, that somehow I didn't know that we had mutual acquaintances, but we did, and it was very great, and I ended up changing, and then I talked with them very briefly outside before I left, but it was getting late, so I had to leave, and I exchanged phone numbers with Mr. Tech so that way he could check up with me the next day to make sure I wasn't experiencing any sub-drop, and just let him know that I got home safely, because driving immediately after an impact play scene, even though it had to be done because, you know, I had to go to work the next morning, I didn't really have a lot of choice because I was so far away, you know, just wanted to make sure that I was going to be safe and that I was going to be okay. And that was really what my first experience was like at a dungeon. I've had some pretty positive experiences. I would highly recommend going to a dungeon if you're interested in doing BDSM, or you're interested in trying out different kinds of play. I think they are overall a really great experience. Highly recommend them. Highly recommend getting involved in your local BDSM community. As always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. I do make videos twice a week, so if you haven't already, please subscribe, which you can also do down below. As always, please leave a like if you did enjoy this video, because I want to know if you guys like these videos that I'm making. And until I see you next time, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.